Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, at least 45 people are killed and more than 100 are injured in a petrol tanker explosion in Nigeria. Many of the victims are on a bus that drove through the scene of the original accident. Also in Mali, a Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission's investigating some of the abuses that have gone unexamined over the decades, but many victims say that they feel like the wait to be heard has been too long. And there's blowback after Burundi's president controversially renames top landmarks during the country's 57th independence celebrations. But first, at least 45 people have been killed in Nigeria after a petrol tanker crashed and exploded on Tuesday. The blast happened over an hour after the truck overturned in Benue State, and dozens of people have been seriously injured. Samuel Okoye tells us more.
Accident actually attracted a number of people. It happened close to a village, and you had people who were just onlookers seeing this huge tanker that was overturned. And then you also have some who were there to scoop petrol. Then thirdly, you have people in a vehicle. There were 16 of them, a commercial bus that was trying to squeeze its way through the spillage, and it was the exhaust from this vehicle that ignited the fire. The vehicle exploded, and then there was a second explosion from the oil tanker.
Well, Nigeria's not short on oil or gas. Why would people take the risk of getting so close to an overturned tanker despite the obvious dangers?
It's quite dangerous to move close to an overturned tanker. But the problem here is that many people are poor, especially in these villages. And when tankers overturn, oil tankers overturn, for them, it's an opportunity to make money. Many normally go there with containers to siphon this petrol. And of course, Nigeria, a country of about 200 million people, there's a huge demand for petrol, for vehicles, for generators, and for other uses. So you can easily sell this thing and make some money. So for some people who are unemployed, it's just an opportunity to make money. I mean, there was an explosion in Cross River State last year, and the fact was that there was a similar explosion at the same place, just similar to this, an oil tanker overturned, and a year after, a similar accident happened, and people still went there to scoop petrol. So it's a situation where people hardly learn from what has happened. For them, it's about trying to make money from accidents like this.
Samuel Okoye there for us. Now, Burundi's 57th independence celebrations came with some controversial announcements. After taking aim at international critics of the country's human rights record, President Pierre Nkurunziza renamed several national landmarks. Nicholas Chemin has more.
For the 57th anniversary of Burundi's independence, President Pierre Nkurunziza did not mince his words. He targeted Western powers who regularly denounce the human rights situation in Burundi, a country he's been ruling for 14 years.
I am here to tell the colonizers and their allies that they must stop trying to destabilize Burundi. If they continue, they will have to face God Almighty. God is our witness here.
President Nkurunziza announced the suspension of forced contributions, the tax that all Burundians had to pay to fund next year's elections. But above all, it's his decision to rename certain streets and buildings that has sparked anger. One avenue will be named after General Adolphe Nshimirimana, a close ally and a controversial figure. He was murdered in 2015 during protests against Nkurunziza's third term in office. We spoke to one of Burundi's opposition leaders who's living in exile to get his reaction.
He is trying to divide the country along ethnic lines. He is trying to garner support from the Hutus. They no longer trust him. The country is in a dire situation. Prices are rising. There is no security, no freedom of expression. The people are really fed up.
Nkurunziza has said he will not run in next year's election, but many in the opposition remain sceptical. The ICC has launched an investigation into the crisis that followed his candidacy for a third mandate in 2015. The ICC says the crisis led to more than 1,000 deaths and more than 400,000 people had to flee their homes between 2015 and 2017.
Well, since February, a border dispute between Rwanda and Uganda has been hitting communities on the front line hard. A group of traders, tired of the effect of the political fallout, say that they are taking the two countries to court over the closed frontier. They say that keeping the Gatuna border point shut has cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Gonya Harrington tells us more about what this lawsuit means for the two governments and why traders have decided to take this unusual step.
Three groups that brought the case represent traders and residents of the border area. Now, they're mainly small traders who are almost entirely dependent on the border crossings between the two countries. They're suing Uganda and Rwanda in a court of the East African Community, of which both countries are members. They're saying the border closure violates the establishing treaty of the East African Community, and they want the court to issue a permanent injunction against both countries to stop border closures like this and to ensure that cross-border trade can resume and won't be shut down again. They say traders on both sides of the border have faced huge losses, and they're hoping this court case will ensure that they'll be compensated for those losses.
Now, the border's been closed for 4 months now. Any sign of anything changing anytime soon?
Well, there was to be a temporary reopening at the main border point for around 10 days last month, but in practical terms that had very little effect, and the border remains effectively closed. And there's been little sign of any warming of relations between the two countries over the past few months. That border closure came on the back of some very serious allegations on both sides, notably Rwanda accusing Uganda of harbouring and supporting rebels, accusations which Uganda has always denied. But in recent interviews, President Paul Kagame has reiterated those claims, and so it looks like there's been very little diplomatic progress between the two.
Gonya Harrington in Kampala there for us. Well, Mali's still struggling with the aftermath of the 2012 jihadist takeover of the north. That compounded some of the suffering that stemmed from earlier crises the country's seen since independence in 1960. A Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission has tried to investigate some of the crimes that have gone unexamined over the decades, but many victims say that they feel like the wait to be heard has been too long. Our correspondents report.
Ibrahim is still waiting. 2 years ago, he testified at the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission on crimes committed in his city. Many of the alleged abuses date back to the 1980s. Murders, kidnapping, arbitrary arrests and executions. Now he's seeking redress.
Without it, there cannot be any reconciliation because, first of all, there has to be justice. If I'm given the reasons, then sometimes I can forgive. But without justice, there's no way I can forgive. Because for me, if I don't get justice, then one day at some point, I might try to make other people pay for what happened to me.
In the 5 years since its creation, the Commission has gathered over 13,000 testimonies like Ibrahim's. But this still isn't fast enough for the victims' associations. They complain of barriers to the process, such as a lack of communication and security issues.
There are more victims now than in 2012. The Commission cannot travel to the most affected communities because of security concerns. If these aren't secured, the Commission cannot go there, nor can the victims reach the branches of the Commission.
The next steps in the process are public hearings. Meanwhile, the draft of another bill, the Reparation Act, is still being written. But the president of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission has a warning.
This isn't about bringing total compensation for someone who has lost his herd or home. It cannot be total reparation given the scale of the issue. That's not the spirit of what we're trying to achieve, which is first of all to recognize the victims and that they have been wronged.
Collective or symbolic reparations are also being considered. And while the National Understanding Act is coming into effect and the Reparation Act is being drafted, the Truth Commission's mandate was officially terminated last year and is yet to be renewed.
Well, in the African Cup of Nations, Cameroon made it through to the last 16 after a draw with Benin. Ghana's Black Stars also shone through with their first victory at the tournament with a 2-0 win over Guinea-Bissau. Simon Harding tells us more.
Ghana are surprised that they qualified over Cameroon, but the Black Stars hadn't really hit their stride yet, and the victory against Guinea-Bissau 2-0 courtesy of Jordan Ayew goal and Thomas Partey goal really just show that the Black Stars are getting into their stride and going forwards in the competition. The fact that Cameroon were unable to beat Benin, then yes, that was a surprise, but the indomitable Lions, so Clarence Seedorf's side, had most of the possession, and Eric Choupo-Moting in particular was guilty of missing a few chances, but it just means that two of the favourites, Cameroon and Ghana, have made it through to the last 16, and that's a good thing for the Africa Cup of Nations.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
L'existence de l'Ebola, moi, je ne crois pas. On nous force de croire que la maladie existe.
Rumours and violence. An Ebola epidemic strikes North Kivu province in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. 1,400 are dead. But the international relief teams are not welcome. Lack of security, political discontent, and failures of communication by medical organisations are causing popular distrust. Our observers have been there to see for themselves. Don't miss their account on The Observers on France 24 and France24.com.